All right, hello everyone, and welcome to this Pitney Bowes webinar, Making Returns a Strategic Part of Your Client Experience. I am Aaron, your host. Your featured speakers are Rick Hernandez and Justin Kramer. Now to introduce our two speakers. Rick Hernandez is Vice President of Business Development and Commercial Innovation for Pitney Bowes Global E-commerce. Rick has over 20 years of experience in technology, shipping, and logistics, having worked at successful startups that were acquired by Infor, Stamps.com, Newell Rubbermaid, and SunGard. Rick has 8 patents and was previously head of research and development, customer service, and business development at Endicia. Rick graduated from Stanford University and resides in Half Moon Bay, California, where he lives with his wife and kids and where he serves as a planning commissioner. Justin Kramer is co-founder and head of sales for ProShip, the top enterprise shipping platform that executes billions of compliant, high-speed shipping labels on behalf of its customers that include Macy's, QVC, Kohl's, and many, many more. Well, that wraps up my introduction, Justin. Over to you now to take it away.
Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, today we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about a couple of different things. And it's all going to be around returns. We've got some stories about some return nightmares that some of our customers have heard about. We've got some things about what you can do about it. Without any further ado, though, let me bring Rick on board and let's go ahead and get started.
Thank you,
No
Justin.
problem.
Thank you, Aaron, for the great introduction. And we wanted to go with a Halloween theme here. 2020 hasn't been scary enough, so we thought we'd talk a little bit about some of the scary things that we've all experienced with returns. One of the things that we experience as retailers, as 3PLs, as shippers, and is we want to make things easier for our customers. But at the same time, we're also challenged with lowering the cost and effort of dealing with returns. So in order to get people's juices flowing here, what we'd like to do is start with a survey question to get folks insights and see what types of things are your particular challenges. Aaron, do you want to start us off with our first survey question? I'm surprised at how evenly distributed everything is here. It's interesting, giving multi-selection, and it's people, I guess the headline here is people are using a little bit of everything. Justin?
I was going to say the headline here to me is returns are difficult. It looks like all the way around everything is a little difficult here. So it does look like that a lot of what we're going to talk about today will hopefully help to clarify some things and make things a little bit easier for everybody.
Well, let's move on. So when you think about how do you make things easy, as a merchant, we have a lot of things that are coming in from our shoppers. They demand more and more. They want quick refunds on returns. Being able to have that is significant to their purchase. 58% of consumers want a hassle-free, no questions asked returns policy. And 92% of customers say they will buy again if returns are easy. And again, they want a free return shipping option if that's available. These are important things from a consumer's perspective.
Yeah, Rick, if we could though, one of the 92%, I think that's a really important number, that 92% will buy again if returns are easy. I think that's really important because a lot of customers, we all know that the cost of acquiring a customer is a huge marketing burden. And so if we can keep that customer, that of course increases profit overall. I've seen some reports in the past where customers may buy up to 10 times from you. So every interaction, there's a possibility for returns, which we'll talk about how frequently that actually comes out to be a little bit later. But every interaction is an opportunity for you to continue forward to the next purchase from that customer or terminate that relationship with that customer.
And that's an important thing to think about. Acquiring customers is something that merchants spend a lot of time on, mining the customers you have and extending that life cycle where they go to at least 10 things or more things. You want to have customers who are purchasing 20 or 30 things from you. And every time you have one of these negative returns experiences, you're slowly wearing down the number of users you have. And what's interesting here is when you think about this, when you ask consumers what percentage of their purchases do they actually return, consumers say it's about 10%. In reality, across e-commerce, according to Forrester Research, we're seeing about a 25% return rate for products from consumers. So clearly there's a mismatch here. And when you think about that, if you have a lousy returns experience, 1 out of 4 times, you're basically playing reverse bingo with your customers, right? That customer has a bad experience with you, 92% of the time, they're not going to come back. So you're basically taking a pretty significant chance that you're going to lose your customers. And, if you think about it, if that customer has 10 purchases, it's pretty clear they're going to have a negative returns experience somewhere along the way, and they're never going to come back to you. So you really need to think about those return policies, because the scariest thing from a retailer's perspective is losing the customer you've already earned.
Yeah, when we look at this, I can't help but think, because there's such a different perception from the customers from the reality, there's probably a couple of things at play here. Number one, obviously, if they're returning so much, it seems like the companies they're returning to are giving them a good experience. And number two, maybe customers are not actually thinking of returns in the same way we do, right? That as we roll forward here, one of the things that we're seeing increase in the industry is a term called bracketing, which is where I may buy, a large, a medium, and an extra large to see which fits me, knowing very well that I'm only going to keep one of those three. Or I may try in 3 different fabrics or 3 different shoe sizes or something of that nature. So when we look at this and we see that 51% of all consumers confess to bracketing, this really might be, the customers don't think of the return portion of that bracketing process as a true return. So you really have to think the customer's perception is a lot different from the reality we see in the logistics world.
I think that's right. And you think about the Zappos experience, where you're purposely buying multiple shoes and you're returning the shoes, but it doesn't feel like a return because there's nothing defective. It's just you purposefully picked the wrong, multiple sizes, knowing several of them might be wrong, hoping that you get one that fits properly. I think it is something where we're conditioning consumers more and more to engage us as retailers in that way. I think one of the things that's interesting is again, as we go out with the survey data, this is the Pitney Bowes Global Shopper Study a few years back. And one of the things we found, this is pre-COVID, so this is interesting. When you ask consumers, what is your preferred location for handling a return? Home pickup is the #1 choice. 2/3 of consumers prefer having a home pickup. It's 3 times more popular than dropping it off at a carrier location, and it's 4 times more popular than returning it in store. And when you look at most consumer experiences, we actually do the opposite. If you look at how Amazon treats consumers, it's encouraging them to take it to a location, take it to a Kohl's, take it to the UPS store, when in fact consumers are like, hey, just get it from my house, or take it away from me. The other thing that's interesting is 72% of consumers, nearly 3 out of 4 of your customers, prefer being able to have a pre-printed return label shipped in the package that they received from you.
Yeah, Rick, that's not easy. I mean, let's face it. One of the things about that is it is a operational challenge. Whether you're shipping from a store, whether you're shipping from your own warehouses, or whether you're shipping from manufacturers and 3PLs. But the data doesn't lie. Customers really prefer not to have to find or go to the internet or do anything like that to actually get their return label. They want it there when they get the items.
That's right. Hey, Aaron, I think we have another poll question that we can put in front of folks. That doesn't surprise me. This is consistent with what we're hearing from folks, especially in this COVID era. People want to stay at home. They don't want to have to go to a retail location. This is, again, I don't want, why should I have to leave my house? So staying at home and getting a pickup there is the least scary option. What I find interesting is 18% of our participants are worried about printing a label at home. That's a scary thing for them. And increasingly, what we're seeing is more and more consumers don't have a printer at home. So if you don't have a label in the box, you need to have some other type of labelless return solution for your customers. Something to think about. Justin?
Yeah, I agree. This is exactly what we saw during our last week's poll, during our last week's data that we were sharing from a significantly larger poll. And I agree with you that the reason why people don't want to print a label is because, well, let's face it, a lot of people across all age groups no longer have printers at home because why? You can do most everything with your phone. So if the carriers are able to come out with something where they can actually scan, pick up from home and they scan your phone, or better yet, pick up from home because you've already given that customer the return label. That's just going to seem so much easier and going along with our theme here, less scary for the consumers in order to do those returns and remain happy customers.
So one of our spooky stories here is one of our friends had an experience with a well-known omni-channel discount store. So insert a famous brand in here. The problem they had was they ended up with two right shoes. So purchase was completed in store. These are children's shoes. And what ended up happening is these folks had to take the shoes back to the closest store. So and the store didn't have any kind of option. They would not allow you to return it online. So you had to physically go back to the store. Now here's the crazy thing. You go back to the store, they didn't have the right size. So now you've gone to the store the first time, you got the wrong shoes, you're going back to the store and they don't have the correct size shoes for your kid. And now you got to go back and order online again. This is probably one of the worst experiences you can have. If something's not right, consumers don't want to have to go back to the store. So as retailers, we really need to think through how we manage this. And this wasn't, hey, I got the wrong shoes. The people called the store, said, hey, this isn't what I want. No, you got to come back here. And then even when you get back there, the store hasn't done the work to make sure they've got the right shoes in inventory.
Yeah, that's just a horrible experience.
So when you think about making things easier for your customers, right? We've already provided some data that sort of walks through what do people want to do. They want to stay at home. And when you look at what Amazon's doing from a user interface perspective, it's really interesting. They give you 7 different ways, at least 7 different ways to return purchases. And what Amazon's doing is they're giving you options and promoting options that are easiest for Amazon, right? The last thing you want to do is go to that store. That's the number one option that Amazon's promoting. It's at the top of the list. It's recommended. Then you can do a locker solution. You can take it to the UPS store. And what you're seeing here is each of these options, some of them are free. The top 3 of the top 4 options here are free. One of those options is only $1. But they've got 2 options at the bottom, which is, hey, I can send UPS to pick it up from you, or I can give you the crazy option of I'll ship and pay. In between those 2, I'm going to ship and pay for my own, I'm going to create my own shipping label and pay for it myself. You've got the option that most people want, which is, hey, just have the post office come and pick it up from my house. Can I just have that option? What they're doing is they're removing that from you, even though that's probably your number one option. Free pickup from home. And I don't have to do anything. Why? Because if it's better for Amazon, it's probably a lower cost solution for them to have you bring it to their store than it is for you to just get this processed at home.
Yeah, I think you said that pretty succinctly. I mean, it really is varying what the customer wants. I mean, there's definitely good reasons to leverage those retail partners. The retail partners, I'm sure, enjoy it as well. But at this point in time where everybody is attempting social distancing and no external trips if they don't have to, you're right. Definitely what people want is just something they can easily get picked up from their home and they prefer not to pay for that.
So as a retailer, you really want to think about how do you make the returns experience superior for those customers. If 1 out of 4 things are being returned, when they do engage with your site, you want to have an experience that makes people feel happy about interacting with you and your brand. And it's something that's convenient, it's easy, it's safe. In this age, that's probably the most important thing on people's minds. And this is an opportunity for you as a retailer to think through, well, maybe I should do this. Maybe this is an offering that I should put in front of my customers. The other challenge we have is you have trunk time, right? So when you do take something to the store, again, consumers don't like long refunds, right? You want to get your money back. And in fact, most consumers consider, 64% of consumers, 2 out of 3, think that slow refunds is equivalent to getting a root canal. It's something unpleasant that they don't want to have happen to them. And, part of that experience is driven by trunk time. You print out the label, you put it on the box. This thing is sitting in your car on average. This is pre-COVID. 4 days it's sitting in your trunk. Now, many people aren't driving around, so you've got garage time added on that. Millennials, you add another day or so from a millennial's perspective. And what you end up seeing is this adds to the negative returns experience. And frankly, that refund is not coming back to me. I'm blaming you, the retailer. That's your fault for not refunding me, even though the thing's still sitting in the trunk of my car. And here's the crazy thing is there's a group of consumers, and I think I know a few of these folks, who for more than 50% of their purchases, they're more than 8 days of trunk time for folks like this, which is an astonishing number to me. Now, if you look at this from an average consumer perspective, Amazon's average refund time, so this is how long it takes for you to get the refund, how to get the product back to whoever sold it to you. Once you've kicked off that process, on average, Amazon's refund time is 4.5 times faster than the average retailer. So you're seeing, already if you make options that make it difficult for the customer to get the product to you, and then you also have a long time before you issue the refund, you've got a very painful experience for the customer.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing is we know how to influence this, right? We know how to, that by providing customers with means of getting pickups at home, they're going to be able to cut that trunk time completely out. They'll just send it to the post office, so they'll hand it to their postal person as they come by, or they'll get a carrier pickup. It makes things a lot easier, and of course, that reduces that perceived time.
So in summary, here are a couple of things to think about. Consumers don't realize how much they return. People are returning more things than they think. And increasingly, it's becoming part of the fabric of the shopping experience. It's just innate to what we do. Most consumers are now purchasing with a full intent to return something, bracketing. There's a new term some of you may have learned today. And home pickup and labels in a box are the most convenient and desired return options for your consumers. And consumers hate slow refunds. Forcing a customer to drop off at a store adds 4 days of trunk time. So you are torturing your users. This is like a bad horror movie. Why would you put your customers through this kind of torture? There's no need for it. Now, Aaron, I think we have another poll question we'd like to put in front of folks. That's not surprising. 76% of you say your direct carrier costs or your returns processing costs are the scariest thing from you as a retailer or a 3PL. In fact, if we go to the next slide here, it's kind of interesting. You'll see that actually across the board, retailers believe cost, not convenience, is the #1 challenge in managing returns. So think about that for a second. As a retailer, you've got 2 sets of problems. One, your concern is how do I get these costs down? And the guy managing the shipping department, typically his KPIs, the things that get him paid his bonus at the end of the year, is get these costs down. process these returns, get new inventory returned to stock, but keep costs down as much as possible. On the other side of the equation, when you squeeze out cost, you're not always thinking about the consumer experience. And this is important for you because, again, you spend so much money on the front end of the equation trying to acquire these customers, marketing dollars, advertising dollars, all kinds of outreach. And because of this relentless focus on cost, what ends up happening is you're creating negative experiences for customers. Justin?
Yeah, exactly. I kind of harken this back to all the changes that have come before. I mean, I remember when credit cards were the thing, and we had to move over from cash transactions to credit card transactions, and we tried to charge the customers for it. That didn't work. Customers pushed back on it, right? It was not the experience they wanted. And now as we move completely or as we move more completely, I should say, to everybody ordering things online, paying for returns, worrying about those costs of returns, that is not part of the problem the customer is interested in. They want it to be convenient. They want it to be easy, and we've covered some of the things that how they feel it's going to be easy, specifically home pickup, labels in box, so they don't have to worry about the logistics around that.
And I think one of the things you got to think about is, from a business perspective, you've got to start a return, you've got to move a return, and you've got to process a return. So you've got three separate functions. And oftentimes you've got a technology provider, a parcel carrier, and then you've got a 3PL operation, or your own in-house operation. But you've got all of these different processes, and it's a challenge because there's interaction between these different services. There are a lot of connection points, and there are a lot of opportunities for things to fail. How do you improve your customer experience? The technology provider saying, hey, I've got this great consumer experience over here. On the other hand, the parcel carrier is also saying the same thing. Hey, we've got our own analytics and reporting. We can lower your returns cost. You've got all these different systems that are providing a different perspective. And what's crazy is, unfortunately, they don't all work well together. Let me give you an example. Trunk time, right? So your carrier charges for home pickup, right? So they can get, drop-off efficiencies, right? It saves them a couple of bucks a parcel, right? They don't want to go by your house and pick these things up. Two, your returns portal pushes customers to drop-off locations. So now you've taken, the carrier wants you to go down a certain path. You have a returns portal that does that. Now, as a result of that, your customers are holding on to products for an average of 4 days before dropping them off. And again, this compounds a negative user experience. You have a problem that you're being charged more from the private carrier options to get a pickup at home. You're pushing that problem onto the customer, and as a direct result of that, you're making your customer wait 4 more days before they get the product to you. Another example, you've got bottlenecks and backlogs, right? So your return process doesn't capture enough data on the priority of returned items or customers, right? So you've got this return process, and it's a simple process, but you don't have enough information to understand what's happening with the inventory. Your carrier picks it up, and again, they may not have all of the information the same, and they may treat all of the returns exactly the same. So what ends up happening, if you don't have good quality information and you don't have things sorted in some way that makes sense, all of your returns start to pile up. So think about this. You've got stuff that's brand new, in box, unopened. Brand new inventory you can put back on the shelf. Intermingled with stuff that's been worn, didn't work out, or it's broken or defective. You've got to have somebody go through and do the sortation of all of that. And this causes bottlenecks and backlogs within your operation because literally, like the amount of returns that's coming up, as we've all seen, like deliveries are up, but returns are also increasing along with all of those deliveries. More and more things are being returned, and frankly, fulfillment operations are being overwhelmed by all the returns that are piling up there.
Yeah, and Rick, I got to say that That really is an important thing. You touched at the very beginning of that slide, which is data. We have spent so much time optimizing our enterprise software stacks to push data down the fulfillment process, down from the e-commerce suite through the OMS, through the ERP, into the WMS or the point of sale, so that we can fulfill those orders. But have we actually put any time in and made sure that we are reversing that process as well, making putting as much ease in the data flow when we can actually go ahead and say, here's a label, or here's the, when we see that label in flow, knowing that things are coming back to us and starting the process as described on this screen here.
Yeah, I mean, from a customer's perspective, what you really care about is, when do I get my refund, right? My return isn't complete until I actually get my money back. And one of the problems we have is, across this industry, is it's difficult to return people's money to them. It's a concern. I don't want to be victimized by fraud, right? And so one of the things that, we've beaten Amazon's buying experience up, but frankly, once you get a product returned to them, it's pretty efficient, right? If I do drop something off at the UPS store, typically by the time I get back to my car, I've been notified that I've been issued a refund, or that my return has been processed and I'll be receiving a refund soon, right? So that's a superior experience. What ends up happening though a lot of times is your returns acceptance portal, it doesn't really verify data, and it doesn't trigger a credit from a customer's perspective. The carrier may not be able to verify the return weight right away, or pass you information that feeds your returns processing, your refund processing system. So you don't have a trigger. And therefore, you're not going to give the customer the credit until this return, along with plenty of other returns that are piling up in your distribution center, until those returns are received and processed, that customer is not getting that return, that refund on the product. And it's a pretty poor experience. So if you think about, going into that a little bit, the perceived speed of refunds is really impacted by that. So when you talk about, from an Amazon perspective, you've got trunk time, right? And you've also got a home pickup option. But once you get that product to Amazon, you're looking at about a 2-day total refund time. From a consumer's perspective, the time it takes for me to get that refund, it's about 2 days. Other retailers, unfortunately, these things don't happen in parallel with other retailers. They're sort of one after the other. They're sequential. So you've got trunk time, you've got transit time, you've got processing time. And as a result, customers' perceived experience about this, and their actual experience of when they get a refund, it's 13 days. 2 days versus 13 days. That's something you need to address, and you're scaring your customers away by not addressing this.
And let's face it, there are clear ways to address each of these items that are adding up to those 13 days, by providing the return labels in box, by providing pickup. That's going to remove those first 4 potential days of trunk time, by deep integration with the returns process, with tracking, with looking for weights and other things of that information, which will allow you to start processing the return itself, even before you actually gain custody of it. And then some of my customers, I know, they actually, as soon as they get a weight that proves that it's an appropriate amount, they start that return process for them. If that return process fails, well, they deal with that as an exception. But by default, they trust their customers as soon as they see something that is within a particular range for that, right? And then they still go ahead and go through that processing time. They still have to handle the goods, or maybe they send them to a third party that does all that handling for them to validate that those goods have come back. But it's outside of the actual refund process. And again, like I said, they go after it on the other side if there is any sort of fraud or anything of that information, or that style. So you just have to think about creative ways. You don't have to fix all of this at once, but there are ways through how you present returns to your customers, how you integrate data to your carriers, and how you deal with your processing time, whether it's pre or post refund, that you can do. Especially if you combine all of these, you could really get to a very short refund time, which of course is going to make that feel seamless, effortless, and really easy for your customers to want to continue to do business, because they know if they don't have a great experience buying the item, it's not the item that they want, something of that nature, they're not going to have any more problem with the return process. So they're just going to buy the next item.
That's right. I think as we look at returns processing, you want to be able to make this whole process easy and flexible. And not all of us have the wherewithal to connect all of these systems together and, make all of this technology work. Companies like Pitney Bowes can help you with this. Companies like Returnly are great companies to look at. There are all kinds of companies. Rebound have fantastic tools available to help you trigger these events and get that refund to your customer. So this is what you want to be able to do, is you want to be able to have an end-to-end approach. You need to think about that returns experience that makes returns more flexible, and it gives consumers the experience that they want to have. From a returns perspective, here's one from one of my friends who purchased a pair of shoes from a premium omni-channel brand, somebody you guys have heard about. So very good retail store, awesome location. You go and buy a product from them, and what's happening is the store isn't having the order fulfilled from their DC. It's actually being drop shipped from this famous shoe company. And you receive the product, and it's the wrong size shoes, right? And so it's unclear who needs to be contacted for the return. You call the store, and they don't have a great returns process. You call the number that's sitting on the shipping label, they don't know how to help you. So what do you do with this, right? You end up having to go back to the store. And again, not only do I not have a clear process of exactly what I've got to do, in order to sort it out, I actually have to physically go to the store to get this thing taken care of, which, it's a premium retail brand and they're good at taking care of customers, but you've had a really lousy experience because the whole returns process wasn't really thought through from a consumer's perspective.
Yeah, and again, all this really says is, let's face it, we've just spent the last 5 years trying to figure out how to utilize every inventory source we have to really get to that omni-channel fulfillment. And of course, that means our own warehouses, our own stores, 3PLs, as well as shipping directly from manufacturers. But what I think this is showing is that there's still a lot of work to do for the latter half of that omni-channel fulfillment process, our 3PLs and our manufacturers, to bring them in and provide the same returns process, whether that's a label in box, that might be a little more difficult. But what we can do is if the customer does have to go to our website, have that same return process flow the same for them, because that's where people, if they're not going to get a label in the box, they want to know that there's an easy place for them to go and say, hey, I want to return this order, and make that happen for them. So the more work you can put there, the more work you can put in the fulfillment process there, more likely you're going to have good return processes as well.
So one of the scarier things that's going on right now are private carrier caps. So we talked about this last week, and it's something that's going on right now. And I think you guys have seen the headlines. For those of you who aren't familiar with this or who haven't experienced it yet, private carriers are saying, look, we're going to set a threshold based on some number on how much volume we're going to take from you. And if you exceed that, we're not going to take it. We're going to take a certain amount on a given day. We will leave your trailer of product sitting on your dock until tomorrow. So if you're having awesome sales, you're selling stuff through a marketplace, maybe that marketplace holds you accountable for delivery times, and now you can't fulfill that delivery expectation because Brown has left you high and dry, that's a problem. And I've had a very large retailer come to me in the last 2 weeks and say, hey, you know what? We've been talking about working with you guys. I need a solution now. Can you stand something up? And we're happy to take those parcels off of your hands. But people are looking for solutions right now. So you need to make sure that your forecast from a sales perspective are going to be able to be fulfilled by the carriers you have selected. The other thing that's happening is I talked to a brand who was really concerned about the surcharges that they're paying. So literally, I'm working with the same carrier, and because I'm exceeding my volume, I haven't hit my cap yet, but I've got these surcharges if I go over a certain threshold. So now the package I ship on Monday has a different cost to ship on Tuesday, has a different cost to ship on Thursday, has a different cost to ship on Friday. If my shipping cost goes up $5 or $10 per item, that could be my whole margin as a merchant. So you want to be able to look at your carrier options and figure out what are the options that you have that are going to work for you, and do you have to worry about these things? And so if you haven't done it already, strongly encourage everybody to look at your backup solutions. The USPS is a good solution. Other carrier options may be a good solution for you. I will say, as much as the Postal Service has been in the headlines recently, from a performance perspective, their performance has bounced back, and they have the capacity to handle peak. This is coming from the PMG himself. They've got the capacity to handle the volume, and they don't have caps. So you should look at that as a backup option to the private couriers, because it's really scary that you could have record sales and still lose money because you don't have a shipping solution that's going to work for you.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes down to the fact, let's face it, the carriers are stretched to their limits. They have spent a large amount of money in the last 10 years increasing their peak season capacity, and they have basically been running at that peak season capacity with just a small dip in February ever since the pandemic started. Though they continue to expand those, having a good multi-carrier capability within your organization also means that, let's face it, if you're trying to distribute to certain parts of the Southwest with the continuous hurricanes and tropical storms, being able to switch and be nimble and adjust as necessary is extremely important for your customers who are not affected by those weather events, to keep them feeling as if everything is still at normal.
And I think there's a lot to be said about returns. This ties into it. So private carriers are experiencing the same type of constraints when it comes to returns. So you really do want to look at alternative options, especially given consumer preferences. Consumers want to be able to send their returns from home. They want a free return solution. There's one very obvious choice when you're considering that. And so something worth looking at is, should I be reconsidering who I'm using from a returns perspective as a carrier? So those are the things we wanted to cover. I do want to spend a few minutes just talking about the partnership between Pitney Bowes and ProShip. So we're proud to provide ProShip customers with tools and technology to help you meet your shipping and returns demands. We have standard and expedited outbound shipping solutions and standard and expedited return solutions. We are a proud partner of the United States Postal Service. We are their largest revenue partner. We generate about $18 billion a year in revenue for them, and we process nearly 1 billion digital and physical parcels through their network. So we're very excited about this partnership with ProShip and being able to offer our solutions to your customers. And I will say that as you're thinking about return solutions, we have some of the most comprehensive return solutions on the market. And, we help meet consumer needs around that. So happy to have a conversation with folks who are interested. And of course, we have tools that manage that consumer experience. So we have a Consumer Connect returns portal that's branded with your retailer's logo, or your brand's logo, so that you can, make this a consumer experience that meets your needs and also helps you, address the concerns that your consumers are worried about.
Okay. And ProShip, multi-carrier shipping software. One of the most important things we got to say here is look, all the features that we've talked about today, that is part of diversifying. That is part of giving your multi-carrier shipping system the flexibility that's necessary. Right? And as part of that, of course, we're in use by more than 25% of the top 100 retailers. We write as much intellectual property in-house as possible. We have some very innovative stuff like advanced date shopping, And really what the idea is whether you're a retailer, manufacturer, 3PL, or whether you're in pharmaceutical, FAA, Department of Defense, we present customers in that bracket with the ability to be very flexible with their shipping. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and let's jump to some of the questions. I know they've been piling up here.
Fantastic. All right, everyone, it is now time for your questions. And with that, we can jump into question number 1. And Rick, I'll put it to you. With UPS and FedEx putting allocations on shippers' volumes during this peak season, how do you see the USPS performing with the influx of that excess?
Well, I think so first of all, we have a lot of confidence in what the USPS is going to do. They've done a lot of operational improvements from a parcel processing perspective. And, a few weeks back, you saw some performance issues around the COVID-related volumes that were coming in. That's been addressed, and we monitor millions of transactions daily from a postal service perspective. We're providing tracking for the largest marketplaces in the world, and what we see is that their performance has bounced back. So we're seeing pre-COVID level performance, and that's the first thing. And the second thing is we're also seeing, we've done a lot of capacity planning work with the operational teams from the Postal Service, and we feel very comfortable with where they're at. I will say that every carrier, both domestic, international from the US, international carriers around the world, everybody has experienced challenges in COVID. We're Pitney Bowes, we're a big revenue partner of the US Postal Service. We also spend hundreds of millions of dollars on private carriers as well to service our customers from our own fulfillment centers or for our cross-border business. And we've seen delays across the board. And as an industry, people are getting better, capacity is coming back, but it's been a very challenging time. But when I look at all the carrier options that are available right now, I think USPS is a very good option, and we have a lot of confidence in their ability to execute this peak shipping season.
Very good. Moving right along here, I'll put this question to both of you. Maybe Rick, you start. How have shipping and delayed fulfillment times affected the industries, and what lessons could be gained from the experience of COVID?
Well, just to tie into that previous question, everybody's experienced delays, right? I think the most important thing you can do is set expectations with your customers. And so, we've covered, some previous COVID survey related data in a previous webinar. And one of the key things is that customers' expectations have changed. We're at home now. We're a little less stressed out about when that whisk that I bought on Amazon is going to show up or when that pair of shoes is going to show up. Just tell me when it's coming. Relieve me of that anxiety. And what's happening is people are actually checking the status of their delivery less and less. I'm getting fewer tracking requests from my consumers, and across the board, we're seeing less of that. So people's expectations have changed, but it's really critical that you let the customer know, hey, this is going to take a couple of extra days. People get it. We're living in a crazy time, and as long as you tell customers what's coming, they're very supportive of you and they're very understanding of what's going on.
Yeah, and to add to that, there's really two parts to this question, right? There's the delayed time in shipping, but really the delayed time of fulfillment. And that's something that we as a company, we as a partnership can help to affect, right? If you're a retailer and you're working with companies like ProShip and Pitney, we're going to go ahead and advise things. And the first thing I would advise is really to make sure you're truly omni-channel. I can count, incessantly on the number of customers that we had where they had large portions of their inventory trapped during lockdowns. And we know that there are rolling lockdowns going on in particular areas where there are hotspots. During a lockdown, if your store can be turned into a quote unquote dark store, you can continue to mobilize that inventory even if people can't come into the store without being classified as warehouse workers, right? So make sure that you're looking at both sides of that equation. Yes, having as many carriers as possible is very helpful. Being able to I think, as Rick said, the customers are already, they're expecting some delays. They're not as anxious on as many things as possible. But at the beginning of the pandemic, the biggest problem wasn't the carriers' delays. It was the fact that retailers were running out of items that they could move because they had so many of them trapped in their stores that they didn't have set up to be able to ship from. So they couldn't use the dark store process to liberate all of that, all of those goods.
All right, very good. So Justin, this question goes to you. Which software or ERP tools are being used by companies and managers to tackle e-commerce shipping constraints?
Okay. So the real question there is what tools are people using in their enterprise software stack? Okay. When I talk about the enterprise software stack, from a consumer standpoint, it starts at your e-commerce suite. That the data in there may, especially for setting customers' expectation, may go through an OMS, which connects to your shipping software, because the OMS is going to say, oh, I've got this in New York, I've got this in Reno. The consumer is in Dallas. What's the cost and time to ship from A to B, right? That's setting that expectation. Of course, that may flow down through your ERP, down into the actual fulfillment components, which is going to be your point of sale, which is sometimes included in your OMS. It might be your warehouse management software, or it might also be going through your through EDI to your third-party fulfillment centers, to your manufacturers, things of that nature. And then finally, when all of those execute, you want to make sure that you're advising that properly. You're using the lowest cost service possible. So a shipping software from an execution standpoint is really critical to all those levels, whether it's e-commerce, sourcing through the OMS, or at the actual execution at the point of sale or warehouse, in order to help enforce that expectation at the lowest cost possible.
Very good. Okay, this question will go to both of you. Rick, let's start with you. Any insight into what customers expect to pay for home pickup, if anything?
As little as possible. Customers don't want to pay for a home pickup. They want it to be free. And it's interesting, even a couple of dollars will make the customer go someplace else, even though it's not convenient. So if you can make a home pickup option free, then customers will use it. Now, you've got to strike that balance of, is that something you can afford? But again, go back to what we've just presented. Can you not afford to make a home pickup free, even if you're using a UPS and FedEx? If that gives a superior experience, is that a cost you should factor into what's happening with your consumers? Justin?
Yeah, I'm with you. I just anecdotally, I don't see any consumers wanting to pay for home pickup. They want it to be part of the experience. And the easier you can make that, whether it's through your returns portal, whether that's by providing a label to them, the easier you can make that for them, the better, the more likely they are to return and buy more from you.
All right, this is going to be the final question before we wrap things up. Justin and then Rick, any other thoughts about how to prepare for shipping season?
My first thing is, if you're going to prepare for shipping season, start early. Start in like February or March. There are, of course, there's some things that you can do now, but the reality is, if you look back at some of the webinars we've done in the past, we've talked about the year-round cycle, which really works well for extremely large retailers. But it has a lot of influence. It has a lot of good lessons that you can take away for smaller retailers. And really, what it comes down to is record the concerns that you're having during peak season. Record what goes well during peak season. So once peak season is over, you can meet with your vendors. Nowadays, that'll probably be virtually, to decide what you want to change. So you can have all those changes occurring during what it would normally be a more down season for shipping. So you can train, you can test, you can try peak volume by staggering or by holding fulfillment back to see if you can actually make that 110% of an average hourly volume. So when it comes to preparing for peak shipping season, to me, from my standpoint, it's a year-round thing. Rick, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a friend of mine, Kathy Perman, who's one of my engineering buddies, said peak shipping season planning starts today. You know, and it's every day, January 1st, January 30th, July 1st. You've always got to have that preparation mindset. One of the great things about, one of the things you need to be thinking about is have a technology platform that's reliable. ProShip is obviously one of those high-speed, high-performance technology platforms. When you look at who's providing those services under the hood, make sure all of those services are also high performance, high availability. We're very fortunate to have 4.5 nines from a performance perspective and to be, wicked fast on the technologies we provide. I've spoken to many customers who are frustrated with their technology providers who can't keep their systems running, who can't process labels quickly enough, who can't keep up with the demand, or those systems tip over. Make sure you've got a good technology stack in place, and frankly, make sure you got a backup. If you have something that you don't think is 4 nines, get a backup system in place. It's still not too late to have at least some kind of contingency planning. The second thing is, from a carrier perspective, make sure you've got backup carriers. Make sure you've got options, because everybody's running near peak capacity. Everybody's doing everything they can to pick up the packages, but make sure you've got a backup solution. That's something you really need to think about as we go into peak. It's a little bit of extra effort, but I think General Patton said, a gallon of sweat saves a pint of blood, right? So go through that extra planning process now, put your backup plans in place, and make sure you review contingencies with your staff and make sure everybody's on the same page.
Well, that was a very appropriate Halloweeny note to end on there, Rick. So everyone, we are going to end the conversation there. And lastly, Justin, Rick, thank you both for sharing your expertise with us. We greatly appreciate it. To all of you watching, you could have been many places this past hour. Thank you for choosing to spend it here with us. So this concludes our Pitney Bowes webinar. Have a great day. And with that, we are done.